Hey guys, what's going on? Just wanted to quick jump in here and do an intro before the intro. In this particular episode, we get into mental health, and so if that's going to be difficult to listen to or triggering in any way, feel free to skip this one, and we'll see you in the next episode. For anybody else who's going to continue to listen to this, we're by no means mental health experts. We just wanted to share our journey. We shot this in support of Mental Health Awareness Month, which is May here in the U.S. We hope to, by sharing our story, we could help shed some light on some different perspectives or, different techniques that we found useful for us. And if you know of anybody that needs help or you need help yourself, we've included some links that you could find helpful, and don't be afraid to go seek help. Yeah, please do so. Hope you find this helpful. The show notes will have links to things down in the description. We'll have stuff, and I'll put stuff towards the end of the video as well. So see you later.
I'm Kristen.
I'm Dave.
And today's topic is mental health. Let's start with a check-in. How are you doing, Dave? And how's BGO?
I like your announcer voice.
Yeah. I worked on it real hard.
Yeah. So BGO is going well. Just continuing the grind of video editing and getting different ideas out there. So been playing around with TikTok, I think, since the last time we recorded an episode.
Yeah, TikTok.
It's been interesting. But the reach for the videos, which I've been developing this idea around Practice Fridays, where it's literally just something that I'm playing at night at 9 or 10 at night during my practice routine. And just one little exercise, and I'll record it and put it up and see what happens. And the reception on TikTok is actually way better than I thought it would be, when you compare it to Instagram. So I don't know if it's just the algorithm or whatever, but I'm learning. I'm trying something new out. And so that's been interesting, and thinking about how we can repurpose some of the other stuff that we've done, last year into, shorter videos to get all the equity out of it. But
totally.
Yeah. So how about you?
Smart move. I've actually been playing with TikTok as well. But that's about all I've done. I haven't watched TikTok enough where people that I'm following are talking about the algorithms and talking about how initially when you get on and you start producing videos, you apparently get this massive reach and then suddenly they drop you off. So I'm interested to see if that kind of plays out. I definitely had one video that went I had 1,700 views. For me, that's a ton. I was like, what? This is insane. It was a Friday afternoon. So I was wondering if that had something to do with it, or if it was also just the fact that I was a new creator and they were trying to boost me. So
yeah, it would be interesting.
I think there will be a lot more learnings as they go on. And of course, I don't have the content like you do to repurpose and kind of cut down or whatever. So I was really enjoying just authentically showing up on the app and then just doing a recording, because I didn't have to have a perfect backdrop. I didn't have to have this or that. And I was like, I just want to talk about stitch markers. I just want to talk about yarn. By the way, I'm giving away a bunch of yarn, blah, 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 blah. And it was just kind of fun. And I finally found a more of even though my community is I think I have 20 followers or something, I've actually found people who are really cool. And I'm actually really surprised, because when I first started just looking through TikTok and seeing my knitting community, I was kind of off put, not by everybody, but by some creators. And I was like, this is just content for content's sake, and not there wasn't a point to it. So I was like, I don't want to come on here. And I started doing content that was for content's sake because I didn't know what I was doing. I wanted to play with the videos, but now I'm at a point where I'm like, oh, I actually want to produce content that's interesting to me.
Right.
Not just for content's sake, not just because I'm posting. So I haven't posted in actually a little while because of that. So I haven't done much of anything, which is why our topic is mental health today. My business, other than playing with TikTok, has been at almost a complete standstill. You know this, but I actually have a disorder called PMDD. Look it up if you're curious, but it is particular to menstruating individuals. So it actually affects my life, like my ability to function. And it's in particular a very interesting time frame for me in my life because I'm postpartum. So I have a 19-month-old kiddo right now. And apparently when you stop nursing, like your hormones then start shifting again, and you can take like 12 months to get your hormones back to where they quote unquote were. And before I even was this postpartum, I already had PMDD. So it's been a fucking roller coaster. And I'm finally figuring out additional tools to cope, one of which is medication, which I had not previously really done. Like, it just wasn't something that I necessarily needed because I could still kind of cope. So I know you're passionate about mental health, but mental health shows up in a bunch of different ways and a bunch of different people for a bunch of different reasons. And which is why it's an interesting topic and also highly, highly important, especially when you have your typical 9 to 5 and then also something you're doing on the side, because you can totally be wiped out from something as simple as doing your laundry, much less getting social media posts and doing your business plan. So,
right. Yeah. And I think, I mean, obviously I'm not going to try to relate to,
and I would never expect you to.
You know,
the mental health is like, there's still relatable parts.
Well, of course, you know, and I'm just saying, like, I transitioned incorrectly there. You know, it's in certain conversations I've had with some friends, you know, we've talked about, you know, either wanting to start something, having something on the side, or, you know, even looking for a new job, right?
Yeah.
And just how there's never really a good time for it. And if there is a good time for it, it's probably because you were let go and you have time.
Right.
But then
there's a whole
you're stressed and pressured and whatever else. Yeah.
The anxiety.
So, you know, there's the cliche phrase, I'm going to butcher it, but was it the best time to have done something was, you know, yesterday, the next second best time is now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that totally rings true, you know, especially with, you know, having little kids, that's hard enough in and of itself. And I think, you know, anybody in the Northern Hemisphere, you know, coming out of winter a bit now, you know, it's finally, as we record this, it's starting to get a little bit warmer. So there's hope.
Right.
And hope can be a dangerous thing.
It can also be a really great thing.
It can be. Yeah. But also I think just everybody dealing with their own struggles, you know, too, with either, you know, if you have like, you know, medical depression or some kind of some other thing that affects you, that's definitely something you have to acknowledge and account for. And I think when this episode releases, it might be Mental Health Awareness Month, so we'll leave some resources at the end of the episode.
Absolutely. I've got a bunch of ones that are particular to PMDD too, which I think we should totally include. So we'll definitely do that. It's interesting that you bring up like the starting now, because I think what's hard too is like when you're in that, whether it's depression or anxiety or whatever, you can put unnecessary pressure on yourself. And I think what I hear, and when I hear you talk about like starting now, I don't hear you say put pressure on yourself for no fucking reason. You're saying start when you can. Like if you're feeling good enough right now, just do a little something. And it's like, it's so interesting to have gone through the last, I don't know how many months I've been struggling, and I still tried to do little by little, right? Like when I could do something, I did. And I was really like, that's why I appreciate you, is like, I came to the table and I was like, hey, I haven't done anything because I've been completely wiped out this week. I have no ability. I've been severely depressed. I have barely been able to take care of my kid. Like I have a very supportive spouse who like obviously picks up my slack and for around the house and stuff, but that doesn't mean that I can do like my side stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like, this is my very roundabout way of being like, this is not a conversation, I think. And I know you totally agree with this, of like, put pressure on yourself, push through. It's acknowledge. And it's way harder to acknowledge than it is to actually like sit down and do it and like have a therapist. And like, even when you have a therapist and you're learning all the tools, it's really hard to be like, yeah, I need medication. Yeah, I need help. Like I need something else, whether it's medication or a supplement or like whatever. And that's all scary too, because then you're like, well, I don't know what the side effects are going to be. And I don't know what I'm going to be like with that. And then you start to just trust yourself. And like, there's a lot of pieces to that, but I don't know. I guess my hope is like in us talking about this, it gives somebody permission to not push themselves, but to just forgive themselves when they're going through something, whether it's actual mental health or just a tough day. And that when they do feel better, they do something because that actually makes them happy.
Right. Yeah. And I was thinking the other day about, how much, we discuss how much we dislike the kind of hustle until you drop culture kind of stuff. And why is that something that becomes so popular? But to me, it seems like it's really popular with anybody who isn't in a relationship yet, or is using it as some kind of a coping thing, right?
You're not wrong.
And
we live in a society where you get rewarded for that and people use it as a distraction.
Right. Yeah, because anybody who has a family or has layers of things going on, she's like, I don't have time for that. I have X amount of time to do what I can do, and that's what you go for, right? You slowly build it out, and that's one of the things that I like about when we first talked about maybe starting this thing, the focus on the time between having your anchor thing and potentially having the full on, solopreneur thing or, partnership or whatever, is that messy middle bit, I think we covered it in the first episode where it's that you hear all these people going, yeah, I hated my job. I wanted something else. So then I started this blog or started this e-commerce thing and look at me now. And like, there's a lot in between there, and there's a whole journey that you have to account for. And if you don't have a relationship where the other person picks up slack, that's going to be another unique fighting thing. Or
absolutely,
for me, I'm able to do as much as I do because this is what I enjoy doing. I enjoy creating. I am compelled to create. So instead of sitting and watching TV, this is what I do.
I'm guilty of sitting and watching TV. I really like it.
It's necessary. Everybody's got their thing,
Yeah. I mean, right now I try to do it in moderation because it doesn't make me happy. It doesn't fill up my cup. It does distract me, and it is helpful in that way, especially when sometimes all I can do is stare at a wall because I'm depressed or tired or whatever. But that doesn't mean it like actually makes me happier.
Right. And then when people ask me what I do watch on TV, it's, my wife and I will watch shows like Witcher or something, but it takes us like 3 months to finish an entire season just because of timing and whatever else. But then for me, like I've gotten really into F1 racing, which was the last thing I thought I would get into. But yeah, I will watch all the practice rounds. I will watch all the qualifying rounds, and everybody who just thinks, wow, it's a bunch of cars making some turns. It is super technical. Like once you learn the rules and how like the physics affects everything, it becomes really interesting. You
have yet to convince me.
Well, that's fine. I'm not
each their own.
Exactly. I understand it's totally a thing. And I didn't think I would get into it until I tried it a little bit. And so this will be the first or second full season that I've watched. But yeah, thank God for technology. I have it recorded so I don't have to wake up at 4 a.m. for, a European race. So
that is kind of the blessing of the age that we're in right now. I'm like, oh, I want to distract myself. Oh, I can watch the show that I actually want to really watch versus just turning it on. I recently heard, I'm going to mess up her name. So there's these two sisters that wrote the book Burnout, and it's Amelia and Emily. And their last name, I think I'm going to mispronounce. So I'm not, or I like don't remember it exactly. So I'm not going to say it. But I recently heard one of the sisters, Amelia, speak, and she was talking about how like, she's like, TV's great. TV's great as a distraction. If you just need to numb out for a little bit, she's like, by all means do that. And I've never heard anybody say that before when it comes to mental health. They were like, no, don't watch TV. Like, that's not going to help you. And it's like, true, it doesn't help. Like, big picture does not actually like make you heal, right? But if your coping mechanism is to distract for a little bit, just so you can get some space from whatever it is that's ailing you, whether it's a fight with your spouse or a little bit of depression or a COVID exposure that your child had for the sixth time and you're ready to pull your hair out because you now have to have them home for another week, a little distraction isn't a bad thing as long as you cope with the feelings that you're having. And so I really liked the way that she phrased it because I was like, oh, I have permission from someone who's like a doctor who like knows, who's done extensive studying and research on like burnout and understanding like the human psyche, that I could just occasionally just distract myself and that's okay. And I like that permission. We need to be giving more permission to people in general about just being human. That's my takeaway from a lot of different things. I don't think we give people enough like permission to be human, which really hurts all of our mental health. Like hands down.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's with the workplace cultures and all of that within the US specifically.
Yes.
It is bad, and it is on the whim of your manager being, progressive thinker.
Oh my God. Yeah.
At least, if you're in traditional organizations, right? So it's, and just taking time for yourself and realizing that, you know what, maybe for my development plan, I don't need to have, the craft of whatever it is you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Business intelligence or, marketing analysts or whatever, whatever it is you do for your day job. But why don't you put physical health or mental health or nutrition as your development goal? Yeah. This is something that I did. And, my managers, the last one and the current one, are good enough to say, sure, go ahead. I'm
kind of sad that you just got a sure instead of like a yes. Like, yes, you're being a whole human being and you're like making sure that you're taking care of yourself. And that in turn is going to help us as a company.
Well, everybody comes to that realization on their own pace, right?
I know, but it's so frustrating. If we do not take care of our humans and ourselves as humans, we are going to hurt the company. I mean, and that should not be that should not be the fucking reason why we do it in the first place, but that is a byproduct.
Well, and I think that's where having small businesses, or if you're the solopreneur or the side hustle, whatever it is, right? These kinds of thoughts are a lot easier to come by because it's you and you are tied into what you are experiencing. That's right. True. Or if you have somebody who can look at you and go, you need to slow down, right? Because they know you really well and they can tell that you're pushing. Then that kind of thought, comes up. Right. And especially with the stuff that we've consumed with the podcasts or the stuff that we took inspiration from, for this, having the lifestyle business, I think that's going to be just more and more and more of a thing. Right. Yeah. Especially with the, they call it the Great Resignation, but I don't know. I kind of like the Great Rethink as a.
Oh, I like that.
I
haven't heard that one.
I forget who came up with that. But I like it because it's a reevaluation of where everybody is and what they actually want. Because, like I was talking to my aunt the other day, and she was talking about everybody going back into the office and everybody doing this, that, and the blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, you got to look at our generation. Like the lie of being whatever you want, or, just go to school and do whatever you want. Every major thing or every major milestone in our life has been accompanied by some major world event.
Yep.
Right. So, entering into high school was 9/11,
9/11.
and all of high school was, Iraq and Afghanistan, Great Recession for college, starting families with the pandemic. So, okay, yeah, you tell me what worked for you in the 1960s works for me now.
Right.
No, this is a new thing. And yeah, I know. I'm sure this episode is going to have so many comments, which, hey, cool, bring it on. But but I think, this kind of thing is important to discuss, because it's bring the whole person, whether it's, whether you have a mental thing or not, or whether or not you have a particular, medical ailment or not, or whether or not you're even sure of what you want to do, right? If you're still just feeling out, hey, this might be something that I want to try, just go try it. Just go do it. See what happens, So
it's interesting, because as I'm hearing you talk to, I'm thinking about like one of the draws that I've seen a lot of people, like why they're drawn to entrepreneurship, is because they don't, quote unquote, fit the mold of these highly compartmentalized corporate America, where like you have to only bring a particular version of yourself to work. And they don't want to do that, understandably and respectfully. I support that. But if, let's say, and I think I'm coming from a place of like white privilege as I'm thinking about this too, of like, if that's not the case anymore,
right,
will we have fewer entrepreneurs? What's the draw for entrepreneurship? Is that the main one? I mean, I can think of a couple other reasons why I'd probably want to do it, but like, it is interesting. That's been like historically a really main draw is like we all have to make a living, but we don't all have to work for someone else.
Right. Well, and I do. So I have a friend who I was talking to, and they're like, yeah, I've structured my entire career goal with schooling and with everything else to reach a certain point, and I've done it now.
Now what?
And yeah.
Now
it's not what I thought it would be. You're right. So that's kind of the careful what you wish for.
There's actually a book. I haven't read it, but I heard a podcast. I think the podcast was Freakonomics. Because I used to listen to that one a lot, where there's a guy who I think his entire goal in life was to like write a book, and then he did it. And then he was like, well, now what? And so then he wrote a book about like, now what? And it was like, what do you do? And he's like, he talked about how when they interviewed him, he talked about how like, you have to constantly keep putting goals out in front of yourself. Otherwise you don't feel like you have something bigger than yourself that you're a part of. And it's interesting to think about that in like a mental health respect too, especially with what I've been through recently. Cause I'm like, I was just trying to survive. My mindset was survival. It was like, how do I make sure that I'm feeding myself and my kid, and then I'm making sure that her laundry is clean so she can go to daycare. And it wasn't like, hey, I can do this thing, or, hey, I'm so grateful for this thing. Cause I couldn't observe. I couldn't like step back and think strategically. I couldn't address my bigger needs. I had to address my very immediate needs. And it's just really interesting to think about. I feel like I went on a total tangent. Now I'm not even sure where I'm at.
No, it's fine. So I'm going to circle back to one point, because like, one of the favorite stories that my dad likes to say with me is on the first day of first grade, right? We lived close enough that he would walk up to the school and pick me up, and we'd walk back. It was only like half a mile. And so first day, he's like, so how was it? What, tell me about your day. And apparently my response was, who came up with this 8 hours a day thing? I want to go home at lunch. And that has kind of foreshadowed the rest of my life.
Why do we need to be structured the way that we are?
Yeah, who
because
came
that's
up with this?
how
Why is this
the
the way that
system
it
was
is? Why is
devised.
nobody asking any of these questions? Like, why is everybody just accepting it? It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
I mean, there are good reasons for why people do, do what they do or
Mm,
focus on the day job. For some people, that is absolutely what they want, and that's great.
routine and
Good for
ritual
them.
are really important for mental health for some people too.
Right.
Yep.
And good for
No, I totally
them.
agree
I
with
mean,
that.
we need people like that,
Yep.
right? There's going to be a subset that I would include myself in who are less sure of that.
Totally.
So, and with my own, with my own things with mental health, I had to focus more on those things before being at the point now where I can sit down and crank out a bunch of content. Right. And because I know my processes, I know
I feel like that was a
whether
really
or
vague
not.
statement. Would you like to go a little bit more in depth?
What do you mean?
Those things and like.
Well, yeah. Okay. So I was going to get there, but.
Okay. I think you should just not bury the lead. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. That's fair. So, no, but I think there's taking stock in where you were versus where you are now. Right.
Yeah. No, that's a huge piece of it.
So, because like for me, the mental health piece of it was a huge focus for the last like 6 years, up until, well, about 3 years ago. It really wasn't much of a thing for me anymore. And, I had panic attacks while I was in grad school where I was sitting in class and for no reason, it was just like, I have to get out of here. But I forced myself to stay in the chair.
Jesus. That's a lot of restraint.
And part of it too is, I've told my guitar students, I've told a lot of people that that I've mentored, like, if you are nervous, it is because you care, and you should probably jump towards that nervousness, right? And so that's one of those things.
And then there's panic attacks, though.
Well, but so yeah, that's where the sitting down and figuring out, okay, why, what's going on for that, and for some, when they first happen, I had no idea what it was.
Oh, I know. I've had a bunch too, and like the first time, you're like, I'm dying.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain actually is like, I think I'm dying, and you're like, I don't think I'm dying, but I think I'm dying. It's a whole.
So I was pretty close to with my first one, actually, because it happened while I was suffering from heat stroke.
Oh God.
And so I ended up in the ER to get, IVs with heat stroke. And
that's completely understandable. But you would have a panic attack during that too, because then your body's like freaking out. I've had heat exhaustion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that sort of kicked it off. But for me, the thing that I realized, right, like trying to go through that, I've always taken inspiration from other people, that have gone through things. And I discovered the WTF podcast with Mark Maron, and then I discovered Mark Maron's comedy, and that became a huge relief for me, because it was, I'm not the only one, right? Like listening to his interviews with other comedians. There was one with Stephen Colbert, where Colbert said that, while he was doing improv stuff, he was having panic attacks so bad that he would lay on the couch backstage, like curled up in the fetus position, then be like, all right, you're on in 5. He'd get up, do the bit, come back, lay back down. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, so I'm not alone. These are all high functioning, high achieving individuals. So cool. There's some hope here.
I think it was Brene Brown that said that, she has a book that's called It's Not Just Me. And it's like, literally, if we can all relate on various things that happen to us or how we process things, like that is the anecdote to feeling that way. That's one of the anecdotes to it. There's
a great podcast from the Harvard Business Review called Anxious Achiever. And it's all about people who have started businesses or are CEOs who suffer from anxiety or depression or mental health stuff. And there's some fascinating interviews with people who, there was one guy that it jumps out of my mind. I forget which one it was, but He flew out to Vegas for a conference. He stepped one foot into the conference and just went, nope, and flew right back home. And, you know, he, yeah, I mean, he just felt it and went on with it and created some things around it to help him get over it and deal with it. And for me, like, not only just seeing that I wasn't alone, but then also just addressing it and saying, yeah. I have something going on right now.
Yeah.
Was a big help, but then focusing on, okay, I shouldn't have caffeine past a certain point.
Oh my God. Thank you for bringing this up.
I shouldn't eat past a certain part of the day so that I get enough sleep, because if I don't get enough sleep, then I'm going to be anxious.
Yes.
You know, so like the days where I only get 3-4 hours of sleep now, I know enough to know that my anxiety will be triggered because I'm exhausted. And the reason I feel disgusting is because I'm exhausted.
Yes.
But it took a really long time to figure that out and change the diet a little bit. And, you know, again, focus on the health, focus on all of the hard things, doing hard work with
the hard work. Yeah. It's so interesting you bring this up. So like everybody, when they hear about PMDD, like doctors are always like, or nurses are always like, change your diet, get lots of exercise. You're like, fuck you. I like chocolate. I'm going to keep drinking my coffee, and I'm going to keep having cocktails. Like, no, fuck you. And it's like early on in life, I would have never given up the amount of drinking that I did do. Because that was like my social outlet. That was like what was socially acceptable. And now I look back and go, oh my God, now I realize why so many of those things happened to me, why I was in the mental state that I was, like between alcohol, which is a depressant, and sugar, and I still eat chocolate, I still drink coffee, but I know that I can have 1 cup of coffee a day, and I like to have it in the morning, and I know that I can eat chocolate till a certain time, whatever, and I like stick to those things. I was talking to my nephew a little while back, and he's in college. I was brought back for me to like that lifestyle that I was in at that time, and it was like, hey kid, like mental health is important. I just want to like bring up, like, if you're not sleeping 8 hours a night, if you're not eating 3 square meals a day, which is a thing for me because I like won't always eat.
I've never suffered from that.
So it's so interesting. It shows up in different people, but like when I don't eat, I actually feel more control, but because my anxiety like then somehow like satiates. And like, yeah, I don't have an eating disorder. I will like force myself to eat. But it's like hormone related for me. So it's like some weeks I'm like, food is just, and other weeks I'm like, give me everything. But I went through all these things with him, and he was like, yeah, like I hear you. Like, I'm sure he heard me, but I don't think he'll hear me until like he's lived more of this stuff. So it's
well, like, that's the funny thing about college, right? Like I was, a couple of weeks ago, I was invited back to do the SEO presentation a third time at the university, and it was still, you know, Zoom called or whatever else, but I was getting nothing from the audience, which, you know, I mean, it's fairly typical. Like that's okay, that's part of the territory. But, you know, I stopped and asked the professors, like, so how beyond the normal glaze are we right now? Are we good? Are we because, you know, you do those presentations and it's like, I'm going to give you everything, but I know that only like 1 or 2% of you are going to do anything about with this.
Yeah.
But I'm still going to present it because I don't know how it's going to manifest, you know, 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
Totally.
Whatever. Right.
So this is the takeaway. If you are like just out of college or in college and you're like, my life's fucked up and I don't know what to do about it, start with your eating habits, your sleeping habits, and your alcohol consumption. Start there. Things might change drastically for you.
So, yeah. And for me, the other thing too, is just there were some individuals where it was like, you're more stressed than it's worth. Have you? Oh,
people like cutting people out.
Yeah. Like not being brutal about it. Right. Because relationships kind of naturally ebb and flow, and, you know, you drift apart and whatever, especially after college. Right. You just kind of tend to drift apart from certain people, but, do you subscribe to that idea of, you know, you're the sum of X number of people around you?
No. But I do subscribe to the belief that the people that you keep around you have a very large impact on you.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's a different way of saying that, but it's not like they equate to me. I'm my own person.
Right.
It's hard because I am someone who is how do I phrase this? Like a diagnosed fixer, which I think has been, it can be a weakness and a strength.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a weakness and strength my entire life. I've been highly independent and I like to go in and fix things for people. Like the fact that I'm not a nurse or like a doctor is like kind of astounding to me, because that's kind of the mentality that I like feel like I embody a lot. So I try to step in and fix things for people all the time, which creates this very interesting dynamic in relationships. And I actually am generally more attracted to have relationships and friendships with people who I don't have to fix. And yet I still have some, or I historically, like when I'm not doing well mentally, like I try to focus and fix other people because then I don't have to focus on myself and fix myself. And that's a piece of it. It's also my conditioning and whatever else too. I think there's some genetic components as well. Like that's just kind of how the world works. But I definitely have had relationships that ebb and flow, and some have not been a choice for me to disconnect from them. And sometimes it has been, and it sucks because like that's a whole nother thing. You have to grieve. And that takes an impact on your mental health too, whether like it's something you saw coming or not. And it's like, it's hard.
And I think it's harder now with social because,
yeah, you have to like
you
make
do not get away from people anymore.
Yeah. Unless you purposely like unfollow or whatever, or mute or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's
and that's an interesting dynamic, because I feel like going through that stage, at least for us, it was still early enough where if you drifted apart, and that was fine. Right. Mm-hmm. But now if you follow somebody, how often do you actually, cull your own list? Like I know people who do it regularly, but
yeah. I do it on an ad hoc basis based on what's needed in my, but I definitely have, I mean, I don't know if you find this with people, but I have like a few people that fill my cup. Like I spend time with them and I am never drained after being with them. And like, I'm not an introvert, but I don't consider myself an extrovert either. So like, there are times that I will go and hang out with people and I am completely drained afterwards. I still really like them as people. Mm-hmm. And I still get value out of the relationship. And I imagine they do too. And that's why we continue to have friendship, but they don't fill me up. But then there are just some people that just like feed my soul.
Yeah.
And that is a whole interesting piece on like mental health too, because it's like, I have to take stock of that and be aware of that when I'm not in a state to like socialize. And if they're not, most everybody that I surround myself with is very like on the mental health train and totally gets it. And like, if I'm like, hey, I did this to my friend the other day, I was like, and it wasn't because she drains me. It was not, she doesn't drain me, but I was like, hey, I'm drained, period. Right. I don't have anything left to give this week. I need to reschedule. And she was like, thank you for being honest with me. Cause I told her exactly what was happening. Right. She's like, thank you for being vulnerable. And she's like, we can absolutely reschedule. I actually need the time too for reason. So I was like, that's exactly the type of friend I want. Someone who's going to be like, hey, I recognize that you're being completely honest with me and vulnerable. And like, you're allowed to be who you are and come as you are. And I hope that like with the pandemic that we're transitioning more, and maybe in even like the anchor gig stuff, we're being more holistic people and getting treated more holistically and allowed to show up more authentically. And that's not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like there are so many women in particular that I follow on like Instagram, especially like women of color, who are authentically themselves on social, and you know exactly what you're getting for their business when you're ordering from them or whatever. And they're amazing and they're kick-ass, and they call it quits when they need to call it quits. And they are setting an example for everyone else to learn from. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly how I want to live. I want to like live up to like what they're already doing, like show up when I need to show up for myself. And
I was talking to a friend the other day about, starting this thing or having the BGO site or whatever else. And they're like, yeah, but are you really going to do that forever? I said, no, it's a creative project. Like, things will ebb and flow. And I think, if you look at the comparison between American TV versus, British TV, right? American TV is like 8 seasons, and the last 3 seasons are always crap. Like they've gone too far because they're squeezing all the money out of it.
Or if it's Grey's Anatomy, it's 18 seasons. The middle, like 10 were crap.
Right. But they were still profitable, so they cranked them out. Right.
Yep.
Meanwhile, you look
They
at,
eased the money out.
you look at like BBC, and it's like 2 seasons, 3 seasons. Like they did what they needed to do, and they ended the series.
Although there might be an anomaly currently. I am watching Call the Midwife, and they are on, I thought it ended and it apparently didn't. And I'm starting to wonder if they're really starting to, like, there's an element of like the trueness of the show that is no longer being held true. And it's like, I'm a little sad. They're like scandalizing it a little bit more for ratings. So I'm a little sad. I know I know you watch it too.
I've seen probably 1 season just because.
Oh, you have?
It's been on in the background as I've gone through the hallway or whatever. I can't say that I've actively gone and watched it.
Well, you're missing out then.
No, I can't say that I am. But yeah, I think that's one of the things too, where, you know, like going back to the hustle culture thing, I think with what we're exposed to within American media and all of that, especially around side projects and whatever else is, if it doesn't, you know, if you don't start something and it immediately hockey sticks and you're immediately on Shark Tank or selling $100 million, then it's not worthwhile. It's like, no, that's false. Yeah. Like, you know, that's really nice for whoever that happens to. I mean, sometimes it's an absolute curse that you're that successful that quickly.
True.
But I think for the vast majority of the world, making enough to make ends meet is exactly what people want, because they can focus on other things that bring them happiness and not just, you know, grind it out or whatever else.
Yes.
Right? And so I think part of the mental health thing, we said this in some previous episodes of, you know your why, know why you're doing it, what you want it to be. And if you don't know that yet, spend some time to think about it before you just jump into, you know, the endless grind of content creation. Because that's been my takeaway from the last, you know, 13 months of having the guitar site live is okay, I have to launch a video. Where's the motivation to do that? Because I have all this other stuff going on. Like, you know, quick record something, quick do it. What are the things that are going to keep you motivated to do that and keep you motivated to produce when you don't want to? Right. Because that's the work. That's the work of it.
Right. Yeah. And whether you have like a product or a service or whatever, like the marketing of it, the business side of it is the majority of the work. It really is. And it's like, that's a good point. It's like, what is your motivation? And I think it's interesting to listen to you talk about that too, because again, like I'm thinking back on my last couple of weeks, especially my mindset, my motivation has shifted a ton because of starting medication. I didn't even realize how bad I was, but I had no motivation to do my anchor gig. Like I would do it and I showed up, but I was sitting in meetings going, why am I here? Like, I don't even want to do any of this. Like I'd have my prioritized list of things I need to do. And I'd be like, I don't want to do any of this. Right. I'd still sometimes do it. Like I knew what I needed to get done. And then, so there was even less left for like the side stuff. So even just recognizing at some point that, hey, this isn't my normal self. This isn't me. I'm struggling right now. Like, and then getting on medication, I'm like, oh, I have motivation to do all of this stuff now. And it's coming what feels like naturally because it was a chemical imbalance. It wasn't like, oh, I had to figure out just the why. It was more than that.
Right. You know, and it's interesting because some of my musician friends, they suffer from the seasonal depression. Yeah. And luckily that's not something that's ever affected me, to date. But it is interesting because if that is something that you can account for, right, you know, plan your year out around that. So if you know December is going to be a downtime, have all your stuff done by, you know, Thanksgiving, if you're in the if you're in the US.
Totally.
Because especially, if you're designing your own working thing. You should take that into account where, okay, yeah, I need December off because, January I need to hit it hard, and February is another down month mentally. So I got to do everything I need to do for in January, and, whatever, you can map that out. Right.
I'd take that a step further too. And this is coming from my disorder in particular. Like, I know that 2 weeks out of every month that I am going to be completely beholden to something that is not something I can control. So I know, and I know exactly when that's going to happen. Right. So like, I can technically, if things go according to plan, which usually they do, but postpartum is a whole different thing. I can plan out my 2 weeks of like being productive. Right. And then if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And then I learn from that and can make adjustments and just like give myself the permission to be human. And I think that's the other side of that, is like not only the planning of it, but then if it doesn't go according to plan, that's okay too, because like you tried. And that's
how long did it take you to be okay with that?
A very, very long time. I didn't get diagnosed until I was 28, 29. And I've had it my entire life. And to the point where like when I was and there was also, it's a newer recognized diagnosis. In the UK, they've actually known about it for much longer. So like back when I was a teenager, it was not in the vocabulary of anybody. Right. And so when I was experiencing it, to the point where I was like, had suicidal ideation and whatnot, no one had any way to help me, and they had no idea what was happening. And in fact, a lot of people get diagnosed as bipolar because you spend 2 weeks feeling depressed, anxious, rage, anger, severe anxiety, just not yourself. And then 2 weeks of feeling amazing. And you're like, I'm manic. I actually told my mom. I looked at her when I was in high school. I remember this vividly. I was sitting in the front seat of her van, and I looked over and I was like, I think I'm bipolar. And she was like, you're not bipolar. And I was like, I think I am. And it was over more than 10 years that I lived with this in varying degrees, because they're like, birth control stuff does help some people, not everybody. And it did for me to some degree. So it's like, I've lived with it in various forms my entire life and didn't have any understanding that like when I had my own photography business. I didn't realize that this was a part of it. I didn't realize that the reason why I was holding myself back, a part of that was my mental health. I had told myself I wasn't good enough, that I couldn't do this, that I was a failure, all of that stuff was because I had no idea of the situation I was actually sitting in. No idea about my mental health, no idea how to cope with it, no idea, no therapy, no medication, no schedules of understanding ebbs and flows, none of that. Mm-hmm. No wonder it felt awful and hard and like I couldn't do it.
Right.
That's exactly why I think it's a hugely important topic for like us to discuss. Mm-hmm. Your side business is you, whether we like it or not. What you do is you. I don't think we should define ourselves like that, but it'd be naive to not discuss our, like we've been saying the whole time, us as whole humans, right, in a silo as compared to what we do.
Well, and I think that's the interesting thing because, in the music world, right, I am a cellist, I am a guitar player, I am a drummer. And then everybody jokes about how there are certain personalities, right?
Right. We have that in every area.
Right. And so it's like, okay, yeah, drummers tend to be this way, bass players tend to be this way. And with a lot of my musician friends who, may have put the instruments down and moved on to other things, during that transitional period, it was a major like identity crisis, right? Because since I was 12, I have identified myself as a, bass player, as a drummer, as a violinist, as whatever. And it's an interesting, like, tear down your concept of self, rebuild it. And to have to do that at 28, 29, 30, whatever time, each person goes through that. But then you don't hear that in the business side all that much, right?
Nope.
it's always okay, so what do you do for a job? Oh, I do marketing. Okay,
Right.
but we also know when you start talking about, strategic stuff, it's, oh, such and such company is an engineering company. So you should expect this, this, and this with these types of, cultures within engineering, or within, this is a creative agency, not a strategic consulting agency, because of the different mindsets of the people. Well, that's just not true. I mean, everybody has their own particular lens and their own way of thinking. That part of it is absolutely true. But you are what you do, because it's a major portion of your life.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I don't sleep 8 hours a day, but if I did, that's a third of the day. Right.
I still can't believe that you don't sleep 8 hours a day. Like, I would not be able to survive. I would, speaking of being anxious or like totally off the rails and not being myself, if I did not get like 8 hours of sleep a night, it doesn't go well.
I get 5 or 6. If I get more or less than that, it's bad.
That's so interesting. Everybody's different. So
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I don't know. It's like, so if a third of your life is sleeping, buy a really good mattress, right? Mm-hmm. If the other third of your life is work, make sure you enjoy doing what you do, right? And then fill the other third of it with, other things that bring you joy, right?
Yeah.
At least that's been my philosophy.
I know. I keep like thinking about how like I don't want work to be a third of my life, though. But like there's just no way that there are people like the FIRE movement and like the financially independent retire early is what FIRE stands for. And there are people who definitely like are like, screw this, I'm not working my entire life away. And props to them. That's amazing. I probably would have done that if I was going to be single my entire life, because I'd be like, I can live in a van. But I don't want, I feel like there's got to be something, especially now in the pandemic or post-pandemic or whatever this new future looks like. Can't there be something where we go to like a 4-day work week, like a bunch of companies are doing overseas, and like actually do the things that we say that we should be doing to be like our whole human being, actually enjoy life? Like, wouldn't that just free us up to like spend more money? So wouldn't our economy be okay? Like, I don't know. I just don't want to work 40 hours a week, to be honest.
Well, now that that's on the public record.
I mean, I will, obviously. And I like.
Yeah. No, it's interesting to have the conversations, right? And I think it's important to have the conversations because it is something that, the rest of the society is dealing with right now. And everybody has to define what they're comfortable with, right? I know for some people, just the idea of having to do your own taxes freaks them out. So they wouldn't.
That does freak me out, to be honest.
They wouldn't do it, right? Or I've had a number of experiences recently where some extremely capable people that I think would be super good at one thing, I pitched the idea to them and they just are super anxious, right? Like, talked about, oh, why don't you go talk at a conference and spread your ideas? And in front of a meeting, they're amazing. They speak confidently, they own the room, but then you say public speaking at a conference and it was like they were 3 inches tall.
It doesn't translate.
It was just like, whoa. But for me, I like that. I like speaking on stage. I am crap at happy hours. But put me on stage and I'll be totally fine.
Yeah. I remember the first time I saw you nervous and I was totally like, what the fuck? I was like, Dave's nervous. What is happening right now? And I was so like, and it weirdly made me more confident because I was like, okay, all right. I have no clue the situation we're in. I can tell you later what the situation was, but like, I was like, all right, cool. Like, it was just a whole different like mindset shift. And I think what when I hear you talking about that stuff, I think about like people having like a fixed mindset versus like a flexible mindset.
Right.
And I think that really relates to like mental health. Like when I'm in a stage of like depression or anxiety or whatever, I have a very fixed mindset and I'm not okay with being uncomfortable, right? Like this is what it is. And there's no, that's just the way it is. That's the way it is. When I am healthy, I'm like, oh, it could be this way or this way or this way, and I don't think that those two things are completely binary. I think there's a sliding scale. I think like, it's funny because you talk about that individual. I don't know who you're talking about, but I can have a few guesses. And I can, if they were just to think about it as in like, you do the exact same prep work as you would for your presentation. You do the exact same this. It's the same process. You just get up on a stage instead of in front of a conference room, and you have a few more people in the like that's not any different, really. It's really not. But yet they have a very particular fixed mindset about that they need to then achieve or whatever to like get there.
The most unhappy people that I know are the ones that are constantly saying, this should be the way it should be. You know, all the shoulda, woulda, couldas.
But are they doing anything to get to that?
Oh, of course not.
Yeah, that's the other piece of it.
You know,
I've actually done things actively to try to get to not work 40 hours a week. I'm still working on that, obviously. Right. And it obviously is not working toward, right now I'm going more towards the over 40 hours with the side gig stuff. But eventually there will be a pendulum swing. That is the goal.
But I think for me, that's the thing that's interesting for me, right? Because playing guitar, being creative, you know, whether it's through the videos or creating things like this or creative writing, even if I don't publish any of it, right? Like I am a published poet.
I learn from you every day. Did not know that you've written poems and that you're published. Okay. I mean, this makes sense. Music, lyrics are poems. This adds up. Okay.
So, but I do it because I have to, right? There's just that compulsion to create. You know
your why.
Well, and to me, it doesn't feel like work. Right. None of it feels like work.
That's the other piece.
You know, and you talk about, you know, the stuff that gets you excited and do the things like the idea of going, you know, traveling to a conference or, you know, like I did a social media breakfast where I had to, you know, drive through a ridiculous number of, you know, farm fields to get to this tiny town just to meet with the marketers in that town. And like that to me was super fun. I love that.
I was going to say, I don't think that I subscribe to the whole like do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. That's bullshit. Do what you love. You're still going to work, but you're probably going to love parts of it, and that probably is enough.
Oh, there are a ton of musicians that hate touring, but that's where they make most of their money, so they have to, you know. Right. Like I know a bunch of people who were like, I did this to make music, not to sell T-shirts and beer. So like, if it lets you do what you like to do, I don't see the problem, you know? Yeah. It's kind of like that acceptance and like, how do you work with it the best that you can? Kind of like acceptance of like your mental health state and how do you work with it the best that you can? Right. It's just, it's a part of it. Well, I think yes, I think that's a good way to wrap it up at this point. If any of this resonates with you, you know, thanks for sticking around. Thanks for listening. I hope it helps you know that you're not alone with whatever it is you're facing. And, you know, check the show notes, transcript on the website. We'll have any links to, you know, mental health resources or the specific stuff that Kristen called out. Yeah. And if you want to have us dive into any more particular topics or subtopics, please let us know. We're happy to do so. Yeah. And with that, appreciate all the feedback, like, subscribe, share, you know, find us on TikTok and YouTube and Insta and all those things. And we will see you in 2 weeks on the next episode. So take care.